From WLWT, this is Issues.
Hello everyone, I'm Courtis Fuller and welcome to Issues. Today we are going to talk about a very important topic that's been taking place in the city. It involves closing the health gap. Just recently down at City Hall, a lot of people came out to show their support for this organization. The Center for Closing the Health Gap responding to Cincinnati leaders who are calling for an audit to see how city funding is being spent. Supporters and clients packed the council chambers, as you can see. People spoke out during the public comment section. They talked about the group's work to provide affordable health care and healthy food options. This organization founded back in 2004. And here with me today to talk a little bit more about what's been taking place, but more importantly, to talk about the history of this organization. The founder and president and CEO, no stranger to anyone here in Cincinnati, the former mayor of Cincinnati, Dwight Tillery, and also the chief operating officer, Renee Mahaffey Harris. I should tell you that before this, she was an assistant, I think that's safe to say, with former Congressman Charlie Lucan. Also worked with Sherrod Brown when he was here in the state. So just wanted to give that little background. I could spend a whole half hour talking about the background. But first of all, welcome.
Welcome.
Let's talk about the current situation. A lot of people came out to City Hall. There's been this call for an audit. Mm-hmm. I know you're frustrated by that. Let's talk a little bit about that and why now?
Well, I think it's definitely politics that's behind it. There are those, including the mayor, seem to be frightened about the Black Agenda, which is an umbrella organization bringing together various Black organizations in the city to develop a strategic plan to improve the lives of Black people. The mayor is fearful about what that means in terms of his reelection. There was a invoice, one out of hundreds, that was recently submitted, and it had the Black Agenda on it. It was for $3,000. It was in fact paid to community workers, poor people living in Mount Auburn and other neighborhoods, to get them to come to a meeting, a special meeting of the Finance Committee to talk about where's our money. That Black people in this community do not receive their fair share of city funding. So that invoice, after it was approved in December, got kicked back, I believe, in February, and said, well, we can't pay for this. I wanted to argue that you should pay for it, but my board chair said, no, just go ahead and pay for it and be done with it. So I think that was the catalyst. That was, I believe, the belief that somehow they want to prove that the center is engaged in politics, and the center is not engaged in politics. And but that was the way that went. Yes, I'm a prominent member of the Black Agenda, along with Robert Richardson of the NAACP, Bishop Hilton of National Action Network, Chamber, Eric Kearney, etc. But these are not political organizations. We abide by the 501(c) of the Internal Revenue Code. But somehow when Black people come together to talk about their needs, to collaborate on their efforts, we're being political. Whereas we see white organizations do that every day, and it's good civic engagement. So there is a double standard here. And I think that for some time, Coolidge of the Inquirer, along with Jason and Dan Horn, in my opinion, have done nothing but racial profiling of Black leaders and Black organizations. Keep in mind, for the past several years, each year, someone goes from the Inquirer, goes to the city, and they pull all of our vouchers and go through it. To me, that's racial profiling. There are hundreds of organizations, and they continue to do that.
So you're saying it's okay to look at
Absolutely.
the funding,
Absolutely.
but do it across the board.
Absolutely. Look at the funding, but they have been looking and looking and looking. And so they thought this invoice gave them the option or the ability to go in and then make all kinds of scurrilous kinds of comments, disparaging remarks about the center and its work. And that's not right. They continued to talk about us being a political organization. We're not a political organization. We're a civic organization, and we do what civic organizations are allowed to do. We're allowed to advocate. But you know, if we come together, then there's a problem. And remind me of the codes after slavery, where blacks couldn't come together, couldn't meet without a white person being there. There is something very, very deeply disturbing by the actions of these reporters, along with the collaboration of the mayor. Very, very disturbing to me.
And a lot of people at the City Hall session sort of echoed your concerns. Eventually we'll get to what's taken place. It's been, I said 2004, so that's 13 years.
Well, not only that, but within the last 3 years that the mayor has been there, he's moved our money to $500,000 to $1 million. He has touted how good. Now all of a sudden, he wanted to audit or require an audit of our work. And Renee may want to talk a little bit about that audit and what it really is. And contrary to the Inquirer, they continue to use inflammatory and sensational terms like investigation. You know, it's always black people doing something wrong.
Let me ask this, and then I'll bring Renee in, because it's no secret. You were supported the mayor.
Yes.
Co-chair of his campaign.
I was.
So that's a high-profile
Well,
position.
and not only that, I was the president and CEO of the Center for Closing the Health Gap during that time. But Roxanne Quarles never accused me of using the organization in a political way.
Mm-hmm. And so now you're not supporting him this time around.
That's correct.
And has you believe that's played into it? No doubt about it?
No doubt about it.
Okay. Renee, let me bring you in, because let's talk about the audit. What are they looking at this past year, past couple of years? What's being?
So they're looking at the past 4 years, and they simply defined it as a compliance audit, which is rather routine. It's an internal review.
Who initiated it? Does that come from the city manager?
The city manager's office.
Well, it was initiated by the mayor. And
Yes.
he was on camera, and the mayor said, I want it audited. I want the center audited.
Okay.
Something you should understand about the process, we've been receiving funding and have had contracts with the city for the past 9 years. And in those 9 years, the staff that manage our contract come out and do periodic audits. We also conduct annual audits of our organization every year with an independent auditing firm. And so we expend the dollars in that contract, and then we submit invoices that they then review and pay. Every one of our invoices have been paid, and every one of our audits have been clean. So the question that I think that you're not raising, or maybe raising, is why now? And I think some of the reasons that Mr. Tillery has already stated are why now.
All right, we'll take a break and then we'll come back. I want to talk a little bit more about all of the things that the center has done over the past 13 years, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Courtis Fuller. We're talking about the Center for Closing the Health Gap here in Cincinnati. With me is former Mayor Dwight Tillery. He's the founder of the center, founded back in 2004, and also the Chief Operating Officer, Renee Mahaffey Harris. Let's go back to 2004. I could actually go back before that.
Yes.
I remember a call that you made to me, or we were talking, when you were thinking about this, and that was a couple years even before that, and this whole issue of this gap between blacks and whites in healthcare. And initially, I don't have to speak for you, but initially, it was a hard message to push out to people because they were thinking, what gap? Mm-hmm. But talk about how the genesis of this organization.
Well, yes, I got interested in health disparities, racial and ethnic health disparities to be more exact, when I was on city council and some of the national news stories that I read. But what really brought this about, there was a lawsuit filed by the city against the Health Alliance back in the 1990s when I was on city council, and it had a lot to do with University Hospital. But long story short, as a result of that, the city and the Health Alliance came to an agreement about the lawsuit and how to settle it. And it had a variety of commitments that the city wanted to make sure that the Health Alliance would do in terms of settling. And one of it is this, the creation of the center. And it's right here, and it says exactly what it is that we're doing. I don't have my glasses on here, I don't know if I can find it. But it is this document that creates the center.
And this is from when?
This is 2004 okay. when this was settled. And it talks about the funding of the center. It talks about what the center is supposed to do, and that not only would the Health Alliance put funds in, the city would put funds in, and private sources to supplement the core activities of the center, and will help guide the center in meeting change community needs. This center would work with established organizations, community groups to carry out its work. It's just amazing. So when this agreement was settled, Ken Hanover, President and CEO of the Health Alliance, asked me to build this organization. I have dedicated my last 13 years of my life doing exactly that. We have brought the major hospitals to come on board to be supportive. We have raised private funds, $17 million over the last 13 years, and that's not counting the city funds. And we have created many opportunities for employment for minorities. We've created many opportunities for businesses for minorities, and we've done an enormous job in raising the issue of racial and ethnic health disparities within the targeted populations, but in the region. And so we're extremely proud of what we've been able to do. The way we've been attacked only says to me one or two things. Either the reporters don't care and they're just going to tell their story, or they're very ignorant about racial and ethnic health disparities. It is the most challenging health issue in this nation. And even today, since 1985, Secretary Heckler came out and said, we've got to address this issue. The difficulty of moving that needle is still a tremendous challenge. It is very difficult to move that needle. Now I'll turn it to Renee, and Renee can talk a little bit about what our approach is so people can begin to understand. But I was just utterly shocked, dismayed, and frankly, very hurt for my staff and for all the thousands of people that we work with who believe in the work that we're doing. So I'm going to turn that over to Renee.
What I was going to ask is to talk a little bit about moving the needle, because it is a challenge. In 13 years, you can't undo what many years and decades had led up to that point. Right. So talk about what you've done specifically to move the needle to where it is now.
Well, first I'd like to talk about the issue of health disparities and the fact that when you look at health, only 20% of health is access or quality of care. The other 80% is where we work, live, and play. And so all those complex factors, from having a job to having good housing to having good education, social supports, those are big issues that don't get addressed quickly. Even the Centers for Disease Control look at, as we talk about health disparities, we're talking about population health. And in our city, we're talking about the population of over 50% of Black people that live in this city. And they're saying, CDC is saying, hey, there's no one way to measure, and we don't even know how to begin to move the needle because the issues are so complex. So our approach is an approach called community-based participatory research, where rather than researching people, we are together working with individuals in the community who are most impacted in developing the solutions. And that's a step at a time, a block at a time. And it is going to take some time to actually see improved overall health outcomes, because most of the factors that affect our health, we don't control.
A couple of weeks ago, you and I were talking about these food deserts, and it came as a result of the closing of the store in Walnut Hills. You pointed to some interesting statistics in that conversation about how Cincinnati, sadly, is worse than many cities. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, so we have 10 fewer stores than the national average. So that means of every 24,000 people, there is a grocery store. And in Cincinnati, we have 10 fewer stores than the national average. So across the country, most communities have at least 50% of their population have access to grocery stores, but in Cincinnati we have 10 fewer stores. So again, that is a big factor that contributes to the overall health and lifespan of our people, because there are many food deserts, and most of the food deserts are in Black communities.
And you talked about transportation too being tied to that.
Yeah. Yes. So,
but also talk about the corner stores. We don't own the corner stores.
No.
Right.
No, yeah. And I do want to say this, that you know, the coverage of the Inquirer and WCPO, their opening coverage said that Walnut Hills was now without food because of the corner stores. And I was like, I went back and saw that recently, and I was like, they got to be kidding me. Kroger's just closed a store in Walnut Hills that made that neighborhood a food desert. And the nerve of a reporter in a station to actually attribute that to a work that we're doing and working with store owners to help build a culture of health. That store owner is one of many other participants and stakeholders in a neighborhood who are working together to change those factors that we've just described that affect overall health.
And also the Do Right campaign. It's interesting because things like Do Right, even the notion of closing the health gap, these have become terms now associated with your organization that we're commonly used now. But the campaign over the past 13 years is called the Do Right campaign. Explain what that is and how effective it's been over the years.
So the Do Right campaign is a campaign to teach individuals how to eat, live, and move right. We have had over 350,000 people be impacted by the Do Right campaign, either in the schools, in faith-based organizations, in neighborhoods, and other organizations whose lives are impacted by the work that residents are doing. So they're designing strategies and campaigns and activities, from line dancing to cooking demonstrations to learning how to make healthy snacks together as a family. It's really meeting people where they are and giving them the tools and equipping them with the power to be a part of their own health and their own health solutions.
All right, we're going to take one final break and then come back and talk about what's next for the center. All right, back in a moment. Welcome back, everyone. We're talking about closing the health gap here in Cincinnati, and over the past 13 years, I should point out, a lot of research and time has gone into this. I mean, look, we know obesity is a serious problem, but addressing it has been based on a lot of issues and statistics and hearing from people in the community, correct?
So yes, our approach is driven by an approach that the Kellogg Foundation's established to address health disparities. And that approach means the very people who are impacted are learning how to collect data, how to use that information to then develop strategies that they lead, that they create. That's different than someone coming in and delivering a program. It's building from the ground up, and it's going to be long-term more sustainable. So when you talk about the outcomes exist because the very people who are impacted are developing the solutions, and not anyone coming in and saying, hey, this is good for you. They are deciding what they want to do to improve their overall health.
I always hate to ask people, how would you grade yourself? Because I would always give myself an A, but how would you grade yourself, despite what's happening over the past 13 years, real honest.
I would absolutely say A. There's no question about it. We've done work, and our work is being recognized all over the country. Robert Wood Johnson offered to buy our model. And so we've done a phenomenal job. We have a academic community partnership with the Department of Public Health over in the UC School of Medicine. If we were as bad as the Enquirer continued to try to portray us in Channel 9, why would all those folks be involved with us? Why would we get the recognition around the country that we've been getting? This is just, this is unbelievable.
So what's next? I mean, obviously you deal with the audit, but what's next for the organization? Where do you go from here?
Well, I think we continue to do the great work that we're doing. You know, we have to move past this. It's very, very unfortunate. Here's an issue, or here's an opportunity that our city should be applauded around the nation, and in many ways we are, because we hear other people say, wow, you guys are doing that? Your hospitals are invested in that way? That's great. We really like what you're doing. Rather than that, irresponsible reporters try to soil the reputation of the center, my reputation, and others. And there's simply no basis in fact. But I guess that's where we are today, when you have reporters that don't know what they're talking about. This is the kind of danger, and when they also have political agendas that they're operating on too, which is really unfortunate.
And the response from the community, I mean, we saw what took place in the council chambers, but beyond that, what's been the response from?
Well, I think that's what's really important, because keep in mind that we are funded to serve the people. It is the people's decision whether they believe our work is valid or not. It's not a few reporters doing sensational and irresponsible reporting. It's what the people, and our track record is huge. Our following is great, and people are saying no one brought up this issue, no one paid any attention to racial and ethnic health disparities. Now that there's some federal dollars out here and some state dollars, all of a sudden we see some of these white organizations saying, we want to get involved in that. I think that's very interesting. And then the mayor's made some comment about, oh, maybe we ought to look at other organizations to do what we're doing.
My thanks to former Mayor Dwight Tillery and Renee Mahaffey Harris for coming in and talking about. Do I have one more break I have to take? Okay, let me take this final break. Back in a moment. Well, that does it for the program today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Courtis Fuller. Have a nice day, everyone.